Mom, tell me
Yeah.
the truth. Is Santa real?
Yeah.
And that's a different type of question than, some of the others. Like, does he really go all around the world on Christmas night? And these sorts of things. That's kind of filling in the myth. And asking point blank, Mom, is this truth? Is a different type of question.
Yeah. And so our policy was that's when we'll, give them the full truth. Well, Erin, we did not get canceled. Thank God. Because last podcast, we took on a subject that could very easily get a Christian canceled. Because there are some Christians out there who might strongly disagree with our thoughts on Santa Claus. But so far, we've survived the onslaught. We've survived the all the reporting that's been done on that controversial podcast. And so we just thought, hey, we're gluttons for punishment. Let's do some more on Santa. So
well, we've survived, but
our ministry hasn't.
You look like you've had a hard week because you haven't shaved. And I'm wondering if you haven't shaved your face because we're talking about Santa Claus and you were just really feeling the spirit of Saint Nick and you thought, I'm not going to shave.
Well,
I'm going to grow a beard.
That would seem, growing a beard, but it would have to be white.
Well, I see some white in there. I mean, if people are watching on YouTube, unless our eyes deceive us, there's some white in there. And so either you're wanting to be like Saint Nick or you've had a hard week with the onslaught of comments about lying to your kids and how we didn't talk through that well
this is already turning into a hard podcast with you ripping on your co-host here. No, it is it's November or was November, right? Isn't that a no shave month
December.
Or something like that?
You really are having a hard week.
Okay. Let's close in prayer, shall we? All right. So let's just do a quick review. So what we're trying to do here, when we first talked about Santa, obviously Santa isn't it's not a big deal. What we want to do is we want to take really every area of life and we want to think Christianly about it. We want to think carefully about it. It helps you. It gives you the tools. Clear thinking, it provides you tools to navigate this world more successfully, more effectively. It gives us the tools that we need to train up our kids. And so that's why we spent a lot of time in our last episode thinking carefully about the larger issues of deception and lying. And we were doing some moral philosophy. And that doesn't just apply to the issue of Santa. That obviously has much broader implications. Mm-hmm. And it's important to think through those kind of issues because there may come a day, or in the past we've seen with Christians, there has come a day when their convictions are put on the line. Mm-hmm. And so you have believers who have had to defy their government, who have had to tell untruths. And so, are you morally wrong in that situation? And I think what we did by going through deception and lying and thinking about it carefully, making careful distinctions, it actually provides us with confidence on our current actions and in possible future actions. Like I can say, I think with conviction, I would have no problem speaking falsely to government officials, to law enforcement, in order to save the life of innocent people, right? This is the classic example we used last time about hiding Jews in Nazi Germany. I would have no problem in my conscience with that because we've made some careful distinctions. And so let's just do a quick review, right? We talked about deception and lying. Deception is the larger category. And deception has to do with causing someone to believe something that is not true. And when we define it carefully like that, I think what it helps us, it keeps the door open that not all deception is necessarily wrong. And so deception's a larger category. Lying would be a subcategory. Lying is a form of deception, right? Because you're causing someone to believe something that is not true. But we would want to say something additional about lying. Lying is an unjustified act of speaking falsely. It's an unjustified moment of getting someone to believe something that's not true. So all lying is deception, but not all deception is lying. And then we made some other distinctions, right? So in fact, we made 3 distinctions. There are harmful deceptions. So if we want to kind of say, okay, deception's a large category, there's harmful deceptions, and lying falls under that, right? And so it's some kind of unjustified deceiving, an unjustified act of speaking falsely. And so when you speak falsely and it's directed at a wrongful purpose. So a child who speaks falsely to their parents to hide something that they did, right? Or someone cheating on their taxes, or someone trying to get out of the responsibility or the consequences of their own actions that are justified, okay? So that's harmful deceptions. Then we said, okay, there's a second category, justified deceptions. So this would not be the same thing as lying because there's not a wrongful purpose. So this is hiding Jews from the Nazis. This is infiltrating a terrorist cell, through deception. These would be justified deceptions. And then we said there's this third category that doesn't really seem to fit into either of those. It's what we call harmless deceptions. This has to do with, deceiving someone when it's a surprise birthday party, or this is a sports move where it's a deceptive sports move, or it's a joke or a prank or something like that. And those are harmless deceptions. Okay, so with that clear thinking in mind, and I just want to say this. If anyone out there is thinking, oh, this is just rationalization, you're just trying to rationalize telling your kids about Santa. That's absolutely not what this is. What we are doing is clear thinking. We're making careful distinctions, and what that helps us to do is to put things in proper categories so that we can navigate this well. And you said it on the last podcast, Erin, and I think it's so true, is that even if you hadn't ever thought about these categories, you probably were already living by them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's Christmas time, so everyone listening has gotten a present for someone. We kind of all participate in that deception of, we all get people surprise gifts at Christmas. So,
or are you talking like a Secret Santa kind of thing?
Yeah, or just that we don't tell someone. So, for example, like in our family, we'll do lists of things we want, but we don't tell the person what we're going to get them, and we'll hide and do things so that the surprise on Christmas morning isn't ruined. So, for example, I ordered something on Amazon for you, but all the Amazon emails go to you. So I told you, let me see your phone. I need to delete an Amazon email off of your phone. And then I told you another thing that I ordered. I said, hey, a box is coming. You can't even look at the box, because if you see who the box is from, you're going to know what I got you, and you're going to ruin my surprise, and I'll be upset with you, and I'll return it if you see it.
So so you're saying
no, did you hear that? If you see the box, I'm going to return it, and you're not going to get it.
I was just trying to move past that.
So this is the kind of fun deception we all participate in, at
okay,
Christmas
so there's
time.
like a hiding. So there's a hiding that happens. Or if your kid says to you, oh, Dad, did you get me the bike? And that's exactly what you got him.
Yeah.
You're not going to, did you get me the bike for Christmas? Oh, well, son, I guess that was a good guess. Yeah, I got you the bike for Christmas. That's what you're going to open up on Christmas morning. I mean, it's things like that. Or it's the surprise party. If you were invited to a surprise party, and if you thought all deception is wrong, and then you got invited to a surprise party where they were deceiving the person to get them there, then you, it seems to me, would be morally obligated to withdraw from
person,
that.
or to let that person. I think even more, if it's morally wrong, wouldn't you have the obligation to let that person know, hey, your husband's deceiving you. He is planning a 40th birthday party for you. He's flying in friends and he's deceiving you. And I think morally, I have to tell you,
So you might be able to make that argument that you would have a moral obligation to tell the truth.
Which we all know that is ridiculous. You wouldn't do that. This is why the careful thinking that you're talking about helps in the raising of our kids, helps them to think critically so they don't see us as hypocrites because we go to surprise birthday parties.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, even if you don't think you have a moral obligation to then go tell the truth, you might say, well, my obligation is to withdraw from the event. I'm not going to participate in their deception. That would at least be an obligation for sure. But you don't do that. Oh, it's a surprise party. I can't go because you're going to lie and deceive this person. And I don't want to partake in such sin. Mm-hmm. So it seems like we already have these categories and we live by them. And so apply this to Santa. And I think what we kind of concluded is that Santa can be a harmless deception. Now, last thing to say, I just want to remind our listeners that this is not an area I think that we should judge one another on. If you decide not to do Santa and you just want to completely, cleanse Christmas of Santa, that is your prerogative, and that's totally fine. And we don't judge you for that. And people who do want to incorporate Santa, I don't think Christians who disagree with them there should judge them on that one, because I don't think this seems to me this is definitely not a clear-cut issue of sin. We're not talking about something that's clearly prescribed in terms of what this is. So if it was clearly lying, that'd be a different situation. But when it comes to an issue like this, it seems like there's a different conscience for different believers on this. And this is 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 23 through 33, which you mentioned on the last one. And so wherever you land on this, I think what we're trying to do is say, hey, you can kind of do the Santa thing, and it's not morally wrong. It doesn't amount to lying to your kids. Mm-hmm. And so, but nonetheless, wherever you fall, let's not judge one another on this. Mm-hmm. Let it be a matter of conscience. Okay. So while we want to say that Santa can be a harmless deception, we also want to be careful, because I think that harmless deceptions, even if they start as harmless deceptions, can actually turn into harmful deceptions. That I think there's a potential for that to happen. And so, I mean, just think of like a joke or a prank. There can kind of be a deception in jokes and pranks. It can be fun, and it's not done to humiliate someone. It's in good fun and people laugh and that kind of thing. But definitely a prank can go too far, and it goes from the realm of a harmless thing to a harmful thing. And I think that's one thing that we need to be careful about when we think about Santa. And so we want to just do a little bit more careful thinking on the issue of Santa. And in particular, maybe we'll share a little bit about what we have done in our family, because we, in full disclosure, we have practiced Santa, or I don't know, how would you say that? We haven't practiced Santa. We've done the Santa Claus thing with our kids, but we have been intentional in how we do it. And so let's talk about how we've incorporated Santa into our Christian home. That wasn't a contradiction. All right. So,
because you say we've practiced Santa, and that means so many different things to different people. And so that's why I think thinking about this carefully is actually a good thing to do as Christians, because I think you can incorporate Santa in a way that could be harmful. Yeah. And you can practice Santa in a way that is
It
bring
remains
some
harmless.
lightness and fun to the holiday without scarring your kids
Yeah,
for life.
and I think we're gonna say that there actually may be some good to the Santa myth,
Mm.
the pretend of Santa, and we'll get to that eventually. But first, okay, the practical things that we did as a family. First and foremost, we never made Santa central to our Christmas celebration.
Mhm.
Jesus was always central, the incarnation. Our theology was always central, scripture was always central. And so the focus in our home was clearly on Jesus. And so Santa was always on the periphery. He's
Mhm.
kind of on the edges, even though the kids are little and they believed in him and we went along with that. Um, he was on the periphery, and the biblical story was always front and center for us. And so um we had an additional challenge, as we mentioned in the last episode. My dad is a professional Santa, and not only is my dad a professional Santa, our kids, who were young enough when he started that career, they were they all believed that he was the real Santa. So grandpa, who was a professional Santa at like the local mall, and doing private parties, was the real Santa. So we had to even be, I think, maybe a little more careful in navigating that,
Mhm.
right? Because they knew Santa.
they knew him. I know him. So okay. So it's funny you said it's a challenge that your dad was a professional Santa, because I was thinking, was that really a challenge for us? But I guess it
In one way.
was, because in some ways it forced our hand to have to talk to our kids about Santa. Now, and kind of come down one way or the other, which maybe some families can just kind of ride the edge and like see Santa at the mall, but like not make a big deal out of it. I don't know. It seems pretty hard in this culture not to have to explain Santa to your kids. But we had to make a decision because your dad was a professional Santa. So he's working at the mall. He's taking pictures with all these people. Now, before your dad became a professional Santa, which he's been now for over 20 years, we weren't the family that would go and stand in line for an hour to take Santa pictures. We just didn't value it like that. And so I don't remember if we ever did Santa pictures before your dad.
We
like
didn't.
so many
With
people
Lexi,
do.
our oldest, we don't
Yeah,
have
we
any
never did.
Santa pictures.
So we started doing Santa pictures with your dad. And
because we got them for free, because it was my dad, and
and he wanted us to bring the kids down to the mall, and so yeah, we had a choice though to say, oh, grandpa's just playing this part, or is grandpa like the one who brings presents on Christmas night? So we did have a special unique challenge that I'm sure any listener listening, probably no one else had a dad who was a professional Santa and had to navigate that.
That I think made it maybe caused us to be a little more intentional of making Jesus front and center.
Yes.
Because very easily grandpa, could kind of move to the center if we overemphasize that.
Yeah. And now your dad is a strong believer in Christ. So your dad made that easier too, because he always would talk, even at the mall, if people who came to bring their kids to sit on Santa's lap for pictures, if they hinted about being religious, your dad would say to even the kids at the mall, oh yeah, Santa works for God and we're celebrating Jesus's birthday. So your dad connected Christmas always with the true celebration of Jesus' birth.
Yeah, he really saw his job as Santa as a ministry opportunity. Gave him lots of opportunities to have little conversations here and there, but it also gave him opportunities, in particular with children, to get a chance to minister to maybe sick children or those who have diseases or going to the hospital. He's got some really neat stories. And so he took his whole job as Santa and viewed it through his Christian faith and as a ministry, and it really opened some doors for him.
Yeah.
Okay, so so Jesus was front and center, and just very practically how this plays out in our home, it would play out in our decorations. So, and I don't think there's anything wrong with having some Santa decorations in your home. But again, it just wasn't front and center for us. So when we think about our decorations, we think about the incarnation. We think about Christ. And so if you go around to our decorations, you'll see in our home only there's only one Santa decoration. It's like these two kind of classic, I don't know, antique-y looking Santa Clauses. That's the only Santa decoration we have anywhere. And it's not central. It's just a couple little Santas on our mantle. That's the only Santa decoration we have. Everything else is, mostly it's focused on Christ. So above our mantle, we have a quote from John 1:1, the word became flesh. And then we make sure we have multiple nativity scenes. And then you put up various pieces of artwork. And then we have a sign that has a hymn on it, a Christmas hymn, O Holy Night. And those are the things that we're intentional about. And of course, we've got whatever, holly and bells and, things like that. You might say they're more kind of just neutral or Christmas decorations. But the point is, even in our decorating, Santa's not a big deal.
Yeah. And the principle of that for us is what we've talked about a lot on the podcast, and the way the wise Christian lives is that things are properly ordered. And so the principle under that is that it's not like you have to run away from everything that has a Santa Claus on it, but your decorations should be ordered properly by affections, right? So properly ordered affections. And so properly ordered Christians, of course, elevate Christ in their Christmas celebration above Santa Claus, even if they do incorporate that.
Yeah.
And so that's the principle that we try to live by.
Yeah. And so it doesn't mean you can't have Santas, right? Now, if Erin comes over to your house and she sees too many Santas, she may judge you. Okay. But yeah. So again, I think that idea of properly ordered, there's going to be a hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so ours was centered around Christ. When it came to gifts and presents, we didn't have a pile of 10 gifts all from Santa for our kids. It was one, maybe two gifts from Santa. And you would wrap those in like Santa wrapping paper. And there was one or two gifts from Santa. And so that it was the minority of presents. It was the majority of presents were from mom and dad and from brothers and sisters and family. And so that was just another way that Santa was kind of on the periphery. The culture is coming for our kids. We have a multitude of examples every single day in the news headlines, coming from every segment of society, whether it's education or entertainment or social media or even government. The culture is coming for our kids with its secular views and ideas and values. And that's why MAVEN is helping the next generation stand firm. We exist to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty, all for the cause of Christ. And this is why we also equip those who are stakeholders in the lives of the next generation. That's moms and dads, that's grandma and grandpa, that's teachers, pastors, youth workers. We want to equip you to pass on biblical truth to the next generation. And so the MAVEN Parent Podcast is one of those key resources that we offer. But this resource is listener supported. We count on the generosity of friends like you to equip churches and families with these kind of resources. So would you please consider at year end giving a generous donation to the work of MAVEN? Go to maventruth.com and in the top right-hand corner of our homepage, click on the donate button to give a gift today. So these practical steps helped us to keep Santa on the periphery. Jesus was central. And so the result for us and in our kids, because every one of our kids at some point believed that Santa was real. But when they discovered that he wasn't real, it was no big deal. It wasn't a big deal to them. It didn't rock their world because good theology was always the focus. And Christmas was meaningful with or without Santa, right? And so in our home, if you took Christ out of Christmas, Christmas would lose its meaning. But if you take Santa out of Christmas, it's still just as meaningful. And so it wasn't a big deal for our kids to lose their faith in Santa. Okay.
Yeah, I even think about Christmas Eve night, how we would do Christmas Eve night with the kids when they were little. And attending church was always the main part of Christmas Eve night. It was the church service and then the feast that we would do together. And oftentimes we would have other people over who didn't have family on Christmas Eve to celebrate with. And so we'd kind of have a big feast of lots of people go celebrate at church, which Christmas Eve service is typically very reflective, lots of Christmas hymns. And then before the kids would go to bed, you would read the wonderful poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." And so that was a little part of the night, but even Christmas Eve night, the main part of the night wasn't around Santa Claus. Even if a little part, we read the poem and then they put out some cookies for Santa kind of thing.
Yeah. And so that's this kind of the balance that we struck. And there's room, I think, for families to do it, of course, differently.
Yeah.
But I think that was one thing that really helped us to prevent a harmless deception from turning into something more. Now, here is another thing that we did. We always agreed that when our kids asked the serious question, like, "Mom, Dad, is Santa Claus really real?" When we knew that this was the serious question they were asking, then our response was to give them the full story about Santa and not to continue that harmless deception and not try to continue to convince them. I mean, there is something fun about, and almost a little magical, right, with your kid having this imagination and this kind of pretend being Santa. There's something that could be magical about that for a child. And so some parents may want to hold on to that as long as possible. But we would say that the harmlessness of it can become harmful if you take that to great lengths. You keep trying to convince them when they're asking the real serious question. And so, when they were really young, they might ask questions about Santa.
Yeah, like
and
how
about
does
his
Santa
life.
get in the house? How does he bring the presents? And you read a book, and just kind of fill in the fairy tale of it, fill in the details of it. But there is a difference, and this is what we noticed with all 5 of our kids. There was a point around 5, 6, 7 years old where they were like, obviously now they're growing, right? And they're starting to make sense of the world around them. And then where they all 5 of them at different points said, "Okay, but is Santa real? Because how could he actually do that?"
Yeah.
And they're really asking. Okay, I think several of them did say, "Okay, Dad, tell me the truth," or "Mom, tell me the truth. Is Santa real?"
Yeah.
And that's a different type of question than some of the others, like, does he really go all around the world on Christmas night? And these sorts of things. That's kind of filling in the myth. And asking point blank, "Mom, is this truth?" is a different type of question.
Yeah. And so our policy was that's when we'll, give them the full truth. And look, if your kid is 10, 11, 12, and they still believe in a real Santa, that's where it might be time for you to let them in on the secret. That may be taking it too far.
Yeah, because
And-
my suspicion would be if your child is still Now, all kids are different, but still believing at that older of age, you have probably had to go pretty deep into perpetuating this so they believe this fantasy. And that I think could be harmful at these older ages, which I think 10, 11, 12. Now they're in the logic stage of life. So they really are starting to make sense of reality and what they see and all those things.
Yeah.
So this is definitely the time to explain the difference between a myth, a fairy tale, and reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is where when it's time for, the full truth, let them in on the pretend, this actually gives you an opportunity to maybe talk about the historical figure, right? Saint Nicholas the person. And this is where the Santa Claus myth arises from. And to help them actually see the pretend, the mythology, the legend has its roots in history. And that often there's a connection between those two things. And I mean, we don't have a lot of reliable historical data on Saint Nicholas. Saint Nicholas of Myra, he was a bishop, he lived in the I think the late 200s into the 300s. He lived in what we now call Turkey. He has pretty much, from what I can tell, and I haven't done a deep dive on this, but from what I can tell, from the sources I rely on, we don't have much reliable documentation about him from his own time. He seems to be popular in the recounting of Saint Nicholas or Nicholas of Myra. So it's a lot of maybe second, third hand sources, but it seems like from people's recounting of him, their memories of him, that he was remembered for some good things. And
first that he exists, that there was this person.
There was a real person.
Yes.
Yeah. But in terms of having the kind of, solid documentation about him, we don't have a lot of that. So we do, we can conclude he was a real person. He's linked to the Council of Nicaea. Now, and there's a great story about him there where he gets really upset with the heretic Arius, that apparently he gets up and goes over and slaps Arius. I've even heard people say that he punched Arius. Now,
of course, Arius was claiming that Christ wasn't equal to the Father.
Yes, he was a heretic.
And so Nicholas was really upset that he was perpetuating this lie about who Jesus was. Yeah. Yes.
But I guess, on our list, our earliest list of who was there, Nicholas isn't actually on that list. So, but there's stories of him being there. So again, but there is a real historical person, but he was apparently known for his acts of generosity. So there's a story of him tossing gold in through a window to rescue 3 girls from prostitution.
Well, the story, see, now even that story the story is that the father didn't have money for the daughters to get married. There was no kind of endowment. So Nicholas helped this father to find husbands for his 3 daughters kind of thing. So that the prostitution one, I think, goes too far. But anyways, so the story being that he helped this family and that he did it in secret, that he put it through a window. This is the story about it, which is, I think it's fascinating to read this, because this is how you see how this giving presents secretly is part of, this Saint Nicholas story.
Yeah. Yeah. And so he's known for these acts of generosity. He's known for helping people out. Now, you can do your own research on this. In fact, we'll link to an article. There's a good article entitled "Who is Santa Claus and What Do We Know About His Origin?" written by a lady named Angie Mostetler. And Angie is the wife of a friend of ours, Tim Ostetler, and we've met Angie. But I know Tim better. Tim's actually a philosopher, professional philosopher. He teaches philosophy at Cal Baptist University. And but Angie Mostetler has written an article online, and we'll provide a link in the show notes and the description. But that will give you some more information, some of her research on this as well. So, but the whole point of that was to say, look, hey, there is a real person, Saint Nicholas, and there are some traditions surrounding him, and he actually gives rise as a real historical person who seemed to be very generous and giving, and that gives the kind of the origins to the mythological Santa Claus.
Yeah, I think this is a great way to talk to our kids about Santa Claus and preface it, whether you celebrate him or not, in this true historical figure that lived and how this has come from that. So we have a couple children's books that tell the story of Saint Nicholas, and I think this one in particular does a great job. If you are doing Santa with your kids, this book called Saint Nicholas the Gift Giver by Ned Bastard. If your kids believe in Santa, he doesn't ruin that, but he gives the origins of Saint Nicholas and then connects it to believing in Santa today. Mm-hmm. So this is a great book that tells the story of Saint Nicholas and doesn't ruin Santa if you're doing that with your kids. The other book is Saint Nicholas, The Real Story of the Christmas Legend. And I think, again, both of these books give the story of Saint Nicholas, the gift giver, the priest who cared for the needy, helped those who were in need, and gave generously. And that book is written by, I don't have my glasses on.
Julie Steigmeyer.
Okay, the writing's a little bit smaller.
I got it for you, Grandma Kunkel.
So these are two good picture books for younger kids on teaching them the story of St. Nicholas, which I think is great. So then when you are at the mall, you can say, oh, remember, this is the remembering of St. Nicholas, the real man who loved Jesus and served others and gave generously.
Man, in these illustrations, he just looks too nice to slap a heretic. I mean, he just looks too happy. So, all right. So those are a couple of resources for you, the younger kids. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then look, as we did Santa with our kids in this kind of way and really approach it as a harmless deception, kept Jesus central, none of our kids experienced doubting God or doubting the gospel as a result of us talking about Santa. In fact, in some of our prep this week, we discovered that there was research from the University of Montreal and the University of Ottawa that indicates that children are not overly troubled upon learning that Santa is a myth. And the researchers apparently were puzzled, though, because even though children will eventually abandon Santa and their belief in Santa, they keep believing in guess who? God. And so I think this is from our own experience with our kids. This was the case. They weren't overly troubled by losing Santa, and it didn't impact their belief in God one bit.
Which that study just makes me think, wouldn't that make St. Nicholas so happy to know? Because
you can ask him when you see him.
I mean, his life was that he did exist. He was a Christian. He was a bishop. Okay, so we would know at least that. Wouldn't that make him happy that children are not pulled from God because of a belief in a myth about him?
Yeah. And I in our research for this and looking into stuff, and I mean, I've got a number of articles that I was looking at that were arguments against Santa. Mm-hmm. And the big argument is that, hey, it's a lie, and if you deceive your kids in this way,
they won't believe
then
you.
They'll maybe question you and therefore question God. Mm-hmm. And I want to say, I think what we've done in the last two podcasts is kind of dispel that.
Mhm.
And there actually doesn't seem to be evidence of that. Now, if you can point to one or two examples of someone who did start questioning God when they found out Santa wasn't real, that's not enough evidence to say, therefore, telling kids about Santa will cause them to doubt.
Mm.
Because there's number one, the evidence seems to suggest the vast majority they're not troubled by it and they don't doubt God. But then also there's other variables, right? And it may indicate that there's actually much deeper problems than telling your kids about Santa. I'm guessing there's probably a lot more going on behind the scenes of
Mhm.
those stories that would cause them to doubt God. And it's not merely because their parents incorporated Santa into Christmas.
My guess would be that if someone really was rocked by learning that Santa wasn't real, my guess would be they were older when they found out, and that their parents, again, like I mentioned before, went to great lengths to deceive them continually as they grew up.
Yeah,
Instead of, because you think about, we talked about appropriate age 5, 6, 7, where they start connecting. Because before that age, there's so many things they don't understand,
yeah.
and it, like, I'm thinking about one of our kids when I think he was 4 or 5, and there was someone asking for money outside of a grocery store. I think he was 4, and then we got in the car. And he said, what was that guy asking for? And I said, oh, he was asking for money. And he's like, if he needs money, why doesn't he just go to the bank? And because, do you get what I'm saying? So there's all these things they don't understand. They just think, oh, you need money, you go to the bank.
Yeah.
And there's no understanding. And so, but of course, as they get older, they start to understand the world better. And so they're going to say, wait a second. Does that big chubby guy, he really comes down the fireplace? Like, how does that work? And they're going to start thinking because they get older.
Yeah, and I think that could be definitely one of the pathways to causing your kid to doubt. But there could be also so many other things, because we know that belief in God, number one, belief in God is affected by your relationship with your earthly father.
Mhm.
So it could be that, hey, there's a real broken relationship with the earthly father. And it wasn't because you were telling your kid about Santa that caused them to stop believing in God or to question God. It's that they have this broken relationship with the man who is to be an image of the Heavenly Father for them, the first picture of what God is like. So there could be all kinds of other factors, and it's not because merely of Santa. So, okay, that I think gets us to a place where if you are a Christian, you can, in good conscience, celebrate Santa in some ways that don't undermine the Christian faith, don't undermine God, and it's not lying. It's not an unjustified deception that has a harmful purpose. And so, some good, hopefully Christian thinking about the nature of deception and how it relates to Santa and all kinds of other issues. But there's still one last thing that we want to talk about, that there actually may be, because we don't want to just say, hey, okay, you're off the hook morally. It's not just that. I mean, that's part of this. And we don't want to merely just think about, hey, what's right and what's wrong. Of course, those are very important categories, big categories, and that's why we thought carefully about this. But we also want to suggest one other thing when it comes to Santa and Christmas time. But we're going to do that next time.
MAVEN exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. To find out more, check out maventruth.com.